district. And I will be moderating this presentation today. So I'm very excited to introduce Vickie Shufer, who will be presenting native edibles and medicinal plants. Vickie Shufer is an herbalist and forager with a master's degree in therapeutic herbalism. She teaches classes on foraging and preparing wild plants for food and medicine, and was the editor and publisher of the Wild Foods Forum newsletter from 1994 to 2014. Vickie is the author of The Everything Guide to Foraging, and more recently, The Forager's Handbook, to be available March this year. Her article on Yaupon holly was published by the American Botanical Council in Herbalgram magazine in 2016. Vickie is the owner of an 11-acre certified native nursery in northeastern North Carolina, where she grows forest botanicals without the use of pesticides or herbicides. The botanicals are harvested and developed into edible and medicinal products. Vickie has more than 40 years of experience in the world of plants and is equally passionate about sharing her knowledge of growing and harvesting for food and medicine. At the end of the presentation, we will have a 10-minute Q&A in the chat box. You can type your questions there at any time, and I will relay them to Vickie, and she will answer them at the end. And now here's Vickie Shufer presenting native edibles and medicinal plants. Okay, Vickie, can you see my screen?
Mute. Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, it was on mute. Okay, so any other buttons I need to push or move? I think I can. Okay, am I ready to go?
Yes, so just let me know when when you want me to change the slide.
Okay, very good. I can do that.
And if you want to turn your video on.
Pardon me?
If you want to turn your video on, sorry.
And let's see, start video. Okay, got it. Oh, yeah, does that work? Okay.
Yes, great, thank you so much.
And so you're going to be the one changing the slides, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start out with the presentation, Forest Pharmacy, Edible and Medicinal Trees and Shrubs. And so a lot of the trees and shrubs that we grow in our yards, a lot of times, these are natives. People are wanting to introduce natives back into the yard. For one thing, they're low maintenance, but also because they're wanting to attract wildlife and the pollinators, and native plants provide food for our native wildlife, including our insects, the pollinators. And so today I'm focusing on the trees and the shrubs and to some degree some vines, but these are things that you find in the forest areas that can be introduced into your yard for shade, for wildlife habitat, etc. So next. Are we there? Okay, very good. So I'll start with pines, and pines are the pioneers of the forest. And so if you have a yard and you have a garden and you just let it be, do nothing and do its own thing, pretty soon you're going to have these little seedlings popping up with little seeds on the top. Those are the pines. Pines they like a lot of sunlight. They're one of the first plants that will grow in first woody plants that will grow in an area that's been cleared, and they grow quickly. They need a lot of sunlight. And so these little sprouts, when they first come up, this is food. You can break off that seed, break off the root and eat them. It has a citrusy flavor. It's like vitamin C, and this is vitamin C. And so then as they continue to grow, those pine trees, the needles, can be used to make a tea for, again, vitamin C. Next. Pines also, they exude sap. So in this left picture, there was sap oozing from the tree. That sap is medicinal, and you can see it. It's like resin. The trees, conifers, produce resin rather than sap. So in this case, this is resin oozing from the tree where it has had a wound and the sap is oozing down. And so next, that sap can be used for antiseptic. It can be used. One of the things it's really good for is after it hardens, you can use it to as a fire starter. But in the spring, there's a lot of food out there. And when those male pine catkins start to swell, bottom right corner, those male catkins, as they start to swell, those are edible. They have a sweet citrusy flavor. But then if you collect them at the stage you see right now, the bottom right, and you lay them out on a tray, like the picture right above it, that pine pollen, that yellow dust that you see all over everything in the spring when you walk outside, that pollen is edible and it's medicinal. So it's one that, and it's easy to collect it if you just spread the catkins out on a tray, wait a few days, let it drop. And so you have this nice yellow, soft pollen that you can then add to your flour. You can add it to a lot of things in tea, or you can even just tincture it. So that pollen is very nutritional and it's very medicinal. So then the needles themselves are, again, you can make the tea from them. So pine tar is what is used to make pine tar soap. And that's, again, the resin from the tree. And that is your insect repellent. If you make soap using pine tar, then it helps to repel the chiggers, the mosquitoes, and all these other biting insects during the summer. Next. So coming up in the understory, under the pines, are oaks. And so oaks, a lot of your old homesteads, you'll see oaks in the yard. The oaks they're the givers of life. They grow large. They provide a lot of shade for your yard. They provide shelter for animals, but they also provide food. The acorns are the part that you eat. And there's white oaks and red oaks. On the far right is the red oak. The red oak, the veins extend beyond the margins, making little points at the end of the leaves. The white oaks don't have those points on the ends of the leaves. They're more rounded. And so there's white oaks and red oaks there's a lot of oaks, but they can be divided into the two main groups of either being a white oak or a red oak. And the white oaks, generally speaking, have less tannin and are much easier to process and use to grind to make flour. You have to leach them first to remove the tannins by soaking them in water. But the live oak acorns, those of you who live near the coast or where there are live oak trees growing, we are fortunate. Live oak acorns are low in tannin. They are sweet. You don't have to leach them. You shell them, you grind them, and they make delicious acorn griddle cakes. And of course, the bark, you can make shelter from the lumber, but the bark is also medicine. If it's a white oak, you can strip that inner bark. It's a astringent, and it's good for as a laxative. As the opposite. If you have diarrhea, it helps for those ailments, and so it's astringent, and it's one that is easily available. But the white oak is the preferred one for medicine. Next. So then we get into other nuts, lots of nuts, and so you'll also find pecan trees a lot of times. Well, pecans are related to the hickories. Hickories are a very sweet nutritional source of food. And in addition to hickories, we have black walnuts. Upper right is the black walnut. That outer hull, they drop when they are still enclosed in that outer hull. So it has to be removed first. All nuts have an outer hull, and that encloses the shell that's beneath the outer hull. And then inside that shell is the nut meat. Well, when the black walnuts mature, they drop to the ground, and that hull is still enclosing the shell. So you have to remove it. And it's a lot of stain. It's if you do it with bare hands, your hands will be yellow-brown for several weeks. But you can run over them in the driveway and break up that outer hull, pick it out. Then you get your nuts, spread them out on a tray to dry, and then you have your black walnuts. Black walnuts contain serotonin, a mood elevator, and so they're very nutritional. We also have other native nuts, include hazelnuts, hickory nuts, beech nuts, chestnuts. And so those are our main native nuts that we have. And these are all trees that can be grown in your yard. Hazelnuts make a wonderful yard tree. And so anyway, we have food all around us. Next. In the understory of the forest, are the red bud trees. And these are just absolutely beautiful. And when you see them in the spring, those beautiful fuchsia colors, that's the time to harvest flowers. And you don't want to harvest a lot of them because you want to come back later and get the pods. But the flowers are edible. You can add those raw to your salads, to any kind of dishes you're preparing. You want to make a topping with a colorful topping. And so you can use some of the other edible flowers in the spring to make a beautiful edible topping. The pods, when they develop, those young pods, they're like little snow peas. You break off the ends and you can saute them just like you would a little snow pea, and add carrots or onions or whatever you want to add to them. But a very nutritional, tasty source of food. So next. Sassafras is one a lot of people have heard about. Sassafras, there's lots of parts of it that are edible, and it's been around a long time and has been used for by traditional peoples and the early settlers after that. And so people hear about the sassafras tea that's made from the root. In the root, there was some possible concern about it being a carcinogen, but that's not the only part that you can use. So yes, you can make a tea from the roots. And the spring is usually when you would harvest your roots before the leaves come out, and then you make your tea. It was used to detox and to purify the blood and to get you ready for summer activities. But again, that's not the only part that's edible. When the flowers come out, those flowers are edible. Completely different taste in the above ground parts and below ground parts. So the flowers are edible. They're more of a spicy taste. They don't have the root beer flavor that the roots have. And so these are very tasty to either just eat raw, and that's really the best way to eat them. And then the leaves, people have heard of the mitten tree. Well, sassafras is the mitten tree. It has 3 different shaped leaves. One, they look like mittens. One is a mitten for the right hand, a mitten for the left hand, and then one, you can be ambidextrous and have your thumbs on both parts. So anyway, but the sassafras leaves, you can find those in the grocery store. It's not called sassafras leaves. It's called fillet. Fillet is dried powdered sassafras leaves. It's used as fillet to put in your gumbo or whatever soups or dishes you're making. And you would put this powder in at the end because otherwise it's mucilaginous and you just get stringy. So sassafras is one of those useful plants. The roots, the leaves, the flowers are all edible, all tasty, and all nutritional. Next. Next. Oh, I'm sorry, we're here. So linden, I always associated linden with being in the mountains until I found a street lined with linden trees in Norfolk. And it's like, and I looked it up, and there is a native variety, but these leaves are smaller than the ones in the mountains, but the flowers are the same. And the flowers, they're so fragrant. You can find them by the smell. And so the flowers with the bracts, you can make a very tasty, refreshing beverage. And this is one that I like to infuse overnight in cold water. And it has, if you do it in the spring, it has just a very refreshing taste. And this tea, you can either drink it as a refreshing beverage and dry the flowers and use it in the summer for that refreshing tea, or you can dry it and use it as a tea to treat colds, flu, coughs, as a sedative. So it has medicinal uses as well as edible uses. This would be food medicine. So it's going to help you and it's not going to hurt you. So anyway, it's a wonderful tree to grow. And like I said, it's growing. It's in Norfolk. They planted them, and now it turns out they actually are native. But anyway, it's a wonderful tree to have. Next. Serviceberries and blueberries, they look very similar. And when you see serviceberries, they look like blueberries on a taller tree than the blueberries. But when you taste the fruits, they don't taste like a blueberry. They have an almond-like flavor. Serviceberries are in the rose family, and they have the same kind of fruit as a blueberry, and they can be used to make your cakes and pies, but the birds love them. If you're lucky to get enough to make anything with, then you will remember the flavor. It tastes like you have almonds in your dessert without having almonds. It's the serviceberry. And then we have the blueberries, and high bush blueberries are one of the best. And these were the ancestors of cultivated blueberries. And there's different species. there's that one of the along the coast we have a blue hibbush blueberry and a black hibbush blueberry, and the black one is smaller than the blue one, but these blueberries contain the anthocyanins and antioxidants that are good for your eyes, and resveratrol that's good for your health. And so blueberries are, you can plant cultivated blueberries in your yard quite well, and they're smaller than the cultivated blueberries that you buy, but they're much sweeter. So if you want to trade size for flavor, then blueberries are great to have in your yard. So next, mulberries come in the spring and look like blackberries. They look like blackberries on a tree. And so um, the mulberries, they don't taste like blackberries. They're sweeter, but you don't have the thorns to have to get through. So mulberries, they start turning black. When they're really black is when they're really ripe. But here again, birds love them. And so if you really want to get some, you have to compromise between fully ripe or just waiting to beat the birds to them. But they start ripening and you can hear the birds out there, the woodpeckers especially, in the early morning cackling as they go to the mulberry trees. So I have a deal with the mulberries. You can have the ones at the top. I'll take the ones at the bottom. And that pretty well works. So we pick at the same time. And what are you going to do with mulberries? You can eat them raw, but then I learned you can make a cordial with them by adding some sugar. I use organic cane sugar, regular sugar works, and some vodka, let it steep, strain it, and you have a cordial. A cordial is sweetened fruit juices. It's and they generally involve alcohol. You can do a shrub and use vinegar instead of alcohol and get the same effect. So mulberries look like blackberries, but they're in a tree. And then on the left are the blackberries. And blackberries, there's nothing to confuse with a blackberry. It's got all those other than mulberries. So, but they have thorns on the blackberry bushes if you're growing for the wild ones. And there's blackberries, raspberries, dewberries. So all these are edible. If they look like a berry, they're a bramble and they've got the thorns, they're edible. So berries you get at the hottest, driest time of the year. And these are your sugars for energy, your juices for hydration. And so berries, the berry season, it begins in early spring and it continues on through into the summer. Next. Cherries, they come up in your yard whether you want them to or not. And so you might as well pick a few out to leave. They have beautiful, fragrant flowers in the spring. They're in the rose family. And so they're an understory tree. You'll find them at the edges of the forest, the edges of fields. And so the fruit is the part that is edible, and they are blood builders. They are strengtheners. And so these can be collected, harvested in the summer, the hottest, driest time of the year is when the cherries ripen, and they're one of the sweetest, juiciest fruits, but they have to be ripe. They're a little bit bitter if they're not fully ripe. So you can eat these on the trail as a nibble. You can collect some berries, put them in water, soak them, strain them, make a tea, make juice with them. I like to make a juice. I put the berries in the saucepan, cover them with water, heat them just to the point where the juice is flowing, and then strain them through a food mill to get the juice, sweeten it. These berries, this juice, they're blood builders. They're strengtheners. So in the summer, this is what will help you to endure working out in the hot summer sun during the day. And so the bark is the medicine. The bark is antitussive. So it also contains cyanide. Wilted leaves, if you cut your branches and you let them wilt, will develop cyanide. You hear about horses and cattle dying from eating black or wild cherry leaves in the fields where they've been pruned, and that's from the cyanide. So the black cherry bark also contains trace amounts of the cyanide in it, but this is your antitussive. So you can make a tincture from it to take to stop coughing when you're have that cough and you can't get rid of it, or you're trying to go to sleep at night and you're just coughing. And so you would take your wild cherry bark tincture to suppress the cough. Next. Elder is your flu prevention. And so elder grows at the edges of the forest, in fields. It likes sunlight, but it is one that you can harvest the berries, make a syrup from, and this is your flu prevention. The flowers can also be used. You can make a tea with the flowers. You can make a tincture with them, or you can make elderflower syrup. And these are also good for flu prevention, but they're also they're considered a diaphoretic. They will make you sweat. So if you do have the flu and you have a fever, then elderflowers are good to use for that. So elderflowers for making teas, tinctures. You can cook with them. You can put them in fritters with batter, and then the berries. You can use the berries for making your syrup. You can also then take the berries. You can make desserts with them. Add them to your breads or whatever dessert you want to come up with. So I've had them in pies. I've had them in various ways. So, and just as a word of caution, if you're not used to eating these things, you could get detox cleansed. In other words, they could give you diarrhea if you eat too many. So if you eat them, you like them, you love them, you want to eat a whole bunch, go easy. Moderation. Next. Pawpaw, way down yonder in the pawpaw patch. That is it's in the custard apple family. It's like a little banana when it's ripe. But they have a pudding-like flavor, but really don't taste like bananas. They have their own flavor. And they have the large leaves, kind of banana-like leaves. But then the flowers are maroon-colored flowers. They are pollinated by insects. So a lot of trees never get to produce fruit, not because they aren't in the right conditions, but because they're in an area where crop dusters fly, or there's pesticides being used, and so the flowers don't get pollinated. So if you want your flowers to be pollinated, avoid the use of pesticides, and then you will get a fruit that can be eaten raw. You can use it in puddings or pies or whatever you want. So pawpaws are an attractive understory tree. They grow in the shade of the forest. They'll grow in the edges of the fields, and so pawpaw is a good one to have in your yard for food to consume. It's also a host plant for the spice bush. Oh, no, not black zebra swallowtail. That's who it is, for the zebra swallowtail. And so they will attract the zebra swallowtails to your room. So anyway, next. So then we have muscadine grapes. And these are the ancestors of cultivated grapes. The cultivated grapes, generally you grow them on an arbor. The wild grapes they just will climb up whatever they can find to climb. They grow in woods and thickets, and again, the edges of the forest. And so the ones that get most sunlight are going to be the ones that produce the most fruit. These fruits are edible raw in jelly. They have a tart skin but sweet pulp. And so this is your resveratrol. You can take these grapes, you can make pies, you can make jelly. And the seeds also contain resveratrol. I prefer to remove the seeds if I'm making a pie because I don't want to have to keep crunching down on the seed. However, the seeds are edible and they are medicinal. So you can do anything with the muscadine grapes, the wild grapes, that you can do with cultivated grapes. And so anyway, and they grow wild and they're insect resistant. So it's a good one too if you have a place where you want to grow vines. That's a great one to have. The black gum, Nisa sylvatica, has fruits. People don't often see those fruits. The fruits ripen about the same time that the leaves start turning red. The black gum is one of the first trees whose leaves will turn scarlet red in the fall. This is when you go looking for the berries. The berries, and they're hidden under the leaves. So you have to look to find them. Many people don't even know they're there. And once you find them, though, you taste them, and it tastes like a sour lemon. And then you take the fruits, you can make a sauce with them or a syrup, add some sugar. It's amazing what a little bit of sugar can do. It will transform it from that sour gum fruit into a very beautiful, sweet, and just pleasant to taste sauce or jelly. So black gum, if you have a black gum tree, don't forget to look for the berries in the fall when the leaves are turning red, and then sample it. Next. Persimmons are one of those fruits that anybody who has eaten an unripe persimmon, and you mentioned persimmon, they make a puckery look on their face. And yes, persimmons are astringent. The unripe persimmons are, and it's when they turn soft and got a little bit of a mottled color in them that they are ripe. The one in the picture in the middle, that one is not ripe. That would make your mouth pucker if you tried to eat it. So it's very astringent. And this astringency is actually good for things like poison ivy or any other type of condition that you need to dry, that you need it to dry. So persimmons well can predict what kind of winter you're going to have. You cut the seed in half vertically, and in the center, the seed cotyledon is going to be in the shape of a fork, a knife, or a spoon. And if it's a fork, it's going to be a mild winter with plenty to eat. A knife, it is going to be biting cold, and a spoon, you're going to be shoveling snow. Yes, we did shovel snow, and yes, there were spoons in the persimmon. So I haven't found it to be wrong yet. Next. Prickly ash is one of my favorites. Prickly ash, it's in the citrus family. On the bottom, you'll see the trunk of the tree, sharp thorns. It's not real common, but it is a great one to have. It is one that, it's a host plant for the giant swallowtail. And so the only place I've ever seen the giant swallowtail is in the patch where there was some prickly ash. So the bark, it's also called the toothache tree. And as a toothache tree, it is numbing. So you can peel the bark off, chew on it, you start salivating, your mouth goes numb, and it's hard to talk to people. So I've learned you don't try to talk to people when you are chewing prickly ash bark. So the bark is medicinal. You can use it for gum sores, infections in the mouth, just for dry mouth. So it stimulates the salivary glands to make you salivate. So the bark is medicinal. The leaves have a little bit of that spicy taste, you might say, but you can dry the leaves and grind them and use them as a seasoning, but more so the prickly ash seed follicles. The fruit of the prickly ash is a follicle, and a follicle is a capsule that splits down the middle and has one seed in the center. And so the follicles, not the seeds, are dried and ground and used to make a seasoning that is, it's been used in some of the ethnic cooking, but it's a spicy seasoning and very tasty. And to add it to your potatoes, eggs, meat, makes a nice addition for what you're eating. So anyway, prickly ash, it is native, and there's one that grows along the coast, that's the Clava Hercules, and the one that grows farther north is Americanum. It isn't real common. It likes open sunny areas, and so most commonly seen in the sand dunes where it's just dry and sandy. So if you have a sandy, sunny spot in your yard and you can get some prickly ash, this is a good one to have. So next.
Vickie, just letting you know that we have 10 minutes left for this part of the presentation.
Okay, and I have a couple of questions here from some people. Do I answer these at the end?
Yeah, we have 10 minutes at the very end. So we'll 10
very
minutes left of this, 10 minutes of the show and tell, and then 10 minutes of questions.
Very
Thank you.
good. Okay, thank you. Okay, so Eastern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana, a juniper berries. You hear about juniper berries. They're seasoning. That's what's used to flavor gin. And so you can make a tea or a tincture. And I am in the process actually of making a tincture to use juniper gin. As a tincture, it can be used as a diuretic. It's antimicrobial, carminative, and anti-rheumatic, and so it has medicinal uses. This is one. There are some juniper berries that are toxic. This one is not, but you still want to use it in moderation, as is true with a lot of your edibles. This is really food medicine. It's not something that you like it, you just go eat a lot of. For any of these, all your wild foods are really medicine, and so you just have to remember moderation always. Next. So Yopon holly. I think I have this one saved for the last one, but for the last slide. But Yopon holly is our native holly, and it's our only caffeine source in North America. And the leaves are the part that is used. The leaves are harvested, and any time of the year can be harvested. You get different, I guess, colors from the leaves. The tea it has different colors depending on whether they're early young leaves, mature leaves, older leaves, but any of these leaves can be roasted and ground and made into a tea. So I hesitate putting Ilex vomitoria on there because that's a misnomer. Vomitoria comes from the name that was given to him by a Scottishman based on the uses that he heard about the Indians using with the Yopon holly. They would have a spring ceremonial a spring ceremony that they would harvest the leaves of the yopon, make a very concentrated black drink. And the Americans called it, the settlers called it the black drink. The Indians called it the white drink because they believed it would purify you of all your negative energies and thoughts. And so they would make a drink and they would add to this drink other herbs. The whole purpose was to be cleansed. And so they would have these other herbs they added to it, and then they would have the ceremony and they would drink this concentrated black tea with the herbs added to it, and they would drink and they would dance for several days until they threw up. And then they were considered to be cleansed, pack up, go home. And so because of this practice, it was called Ilex vomitoria. But at any rate, it doesn't have that effect. I drink Yopon all day and I never have a vomitoria effect. It is a diuretic. It is, it's more like an adaptogen because you can drink it all day and it doesn't keep you awake at night either. The berries, however, may be toxic. Birds do eat the berries. People gather these branches to decorate for Christmas, and that is when the berries turn red. So the berries could be toxic if you eat enough of them, but the birds love them. So leave them for the birds, and then you can harvest the leaves. And in the spring, they have the small white flowers, but there's male and female trees. So if you're not getting berries, you either have a male or you're having a female that doesn't have a male around to pollinate it. Next, and that might be the last slide. Oh no, I did. I have, okay, willow is another native tree that has medicinal uses. This one is more of a medicine than it is a food. It grows at the edges of stream banks. You'll see it at the edges of the forest, especially in areas where it's damp. But the willow, the bark contains the salicylic acid that was used to develop bare aspirin. So you can tincture it, make a tea with it. If you have a headache, it's good for arthritis. It's good for uh, just any inflammation or pain that you have. And so it's also reduces the fevers. So it's the inner bark that you use, and it's in the spring that you want to harvest it. Before the leaves have come out, you can take the bark, strip it, and then take that bark and make your tincture, make your tea first, and then you tincture it. The bark is actually water soluble, not alcohol soluble. So to just take the bark and infuse it in alcohol, you may not be getting the medicinal properties. You may need to do a decoction of the bark first by steeping it in water, low temperature for about half an hour, and then you can add your alcohol to it to preserve it. But it's the alcohol is only being used to preserve it, whereas the hot water is doing the extraction. So it was also used by the Native Americans for building shelters. The limbs are very flexible; they can bend without breaking. The bark has also been used to make baskets and for weaving, for making mats, due to its flexibility, and it peels very easily. You can get long strips in the spring. So black willow is it's the Salix nigra is the one that we have in the southeast, but there's also white willow. Any of the willows, the wild willows, and I can't speak for the cultivated willows because I don't have any experience with them. But the wild willows all contain the salicylic acid and are good for making your tea or your tincture from for treating your pain, inflammation. So at any rate, a good one to have in your landscape. Next. And okay, so these are the references that I've used, and there's probably more too, but I'm going to switch to a show and tell. Now, can you see me?
I cannot see you. I see the top few inches of your head.
Oh, well, we don't want that. Hold on. Forward. Okay, let me see if I can get me positioned here. Are we any better now? A little better. Okay, is this better?
Yes, that should be good.
Okay, so I'm just going to start with a few things. I am a forager and I'm always gathering stuff. And so I like to show specimens in addition to just talking about them. And so I'm going to start with the pine because this is one that its branches are starting to drop off. And so since this is one that has vitamin C, this is one that I'm going to add to my juniper berry tincture that I'm making. So this is my juniper berries. I have them infused in vodka to make my juniper gin. And so then I will take these pine needles and I'll just snip them off and add these to my juniper gin that I am in the process of making. And so this is the cedar that the juniper berries have come from. And here are the juniper berries. And so the juniper berries, they're actually a cone. It's not a berry. And so the cedar branches then I will just use to make a smudge stick, and I'll tie them together and twist them around and then burn them just in the as a fire starter or whatever. So these are the juniper berries. And then I didn't talk about sumac, but I have the sumac, the actual specimens. So we have smooth sumac, staghorn sumac, and winged sumac that I'll grow in the Southeast. There's, I guess, fragrant sumac in some areas, but it isn't here. When you mention sumac, someone always says, but isn't that poisonous? There is a poison sumac and it's not very frequently found, but everybody's heard about that one, but they haven't heard about the one that you can use for food and for medicine. So sumac contains malic acid, citric acid, and so you can strip these berries off. And after you've stripped them off, then you can, I like to put them in the blender and grind them up. It doesn't break up the seed, and then you can take that powder that is spun off of the berries, infuse it in cold water, and I prefer cold. You get a fruitier tasting tea if you do it in cold water, and let it steep for several hours. If you want it quicker than that, you can do a hot water infusion and it'll be ready much sooner. So this tea that you're making from the sumac, it has malic acid, citric acid. It's good for coughs and colds, and it's refreshing and good you can dry it easily. So this is one I've had drying since the fall when I harvested it. And it dries naturally, and then you can just strip it off as you need it and use it. So it's also the powder, if you strain off the powder, remove the seeds, siphon off the seeds, that powder can be used as a seasoning. It's a tart, lemony taste. And so you can make your sumac aid, you can make your seasoning, and again, this is food medicine. So going back to the conifers, the pine, I do have some pine sap that I have collected. This pine sap at this stage, if I needed it for the sap, I could melt it down. But what I use it for at this point is to start fires. So you can put this in your little tinder bundle and you break it up in smaller pieces, and it holds the heat. And this is what you can use to get a fire going, even on a rainy day. So the pine resin, it's had a lot of uses. This is what can be used when it first oozes out of the tree, as the earlier picture I showed. It's a clear resin. And so as it dries, it hardens and it becomes amber colored, almost looking like amber when you find it on a tree. It breaks off a lot of times. You'll find it on the ground under a pine tree where it's broken off and woodpeckers have been pecking at it and knock it off. So your pines, the pine resin, the pine needles, and this one even has the young catkins about to develop. And so once they do, that's going to be food and medicine as well. So then I have a few sample nuts to show. I actually have the black walnuts, which you saw on the slide, but no nutcracker is going to crack these nuts. And so this is where you need two strong stones, heavy stones, and you can crack it open. Of course, squirrels can get it split open right down the middle. But at any rate, the nut meat is naturally sweet. It's very strong. What people make the mistake of with black walnuts, if you're following a recipe and it calls for a half cup of nuts and you put a half a cup of black walnuts in there, it's going to be overpowering. So if it calls for a half a cup, you cut that recipe in half, make a fourth of a cup, because it's such a strong flavor, it will overpower everything else. And so you use it in small quantities. Then I have chestnuts. We do have a native chestnut. Here on the coast, we have chinkapins. And so the chinkapins are, they're native, and we still have some around. And fortunately, I have a tree across the street. I don't know if you can grow those in your yard, but they do grow in the shade in the forest. And so the chinkapins are just another type of chestnut. And so they are one that if you have them, you're fortunate and you can then use them. So can we switch to, oh wait, I have one more. Elderberries, these are the actual berries that I harvested. So once I harvest them, I dry them, and then I take these are the dried berries that I will use, and I'll use about a cup of berries to 2 cups of water, simmer it down to half the water content. Then you can add your honey. If you don't want the seeds,
Troy,
strain it out. Pardon me?
because it was chasing the birds.
Chasing the birds?
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. I thought you were talking to me. Anyway, you can strain it down then, cook it down to half the water content, and add your honey or whatever sweetener you want to use. And that's your elderberry syrup. If you want to preserve it so that you have it through the winter, then you can add your brandy, and I like to use wild cherry brandy with it. And that enhances the flavor, preserves it for use during the winter when you need it. And so elderberries aren't ripe through the winter. So you take advantage of some of your resources to extend the shelf life of these things. And one way you can do it is with brandy. So and anyway, then we have the linden flowers. These are the linden flowers, and they're kind of interesting. These are bracts that grow on the flower itself. And all the flowers and the bracts are both used to make the tea. So they have the bracts, and then they have the flower at the top, and they're yellowish flowers, yellowish white. And they are, this is what I use to make my tea. So at any rate, these are the linden flowers. Okay, now I think I'm ready for Q&A. Do I go to the chat room?
Yeah, so I have, we have some really positive compliments, and I definitely agree. That was wonderful, Vickie. And we do have some questions coming in. So our first one from Alice, she said, I have heard that pawpaws are pollinated by flies. Is that true?
Yes. And well, the picture of that flower, you could see the fly on the flower going for the pollen. And so let me pull this out and come back in.
Yeah, I did see that. It looked like a fly, and I remember you had said insects.
Yes, it was a fly. I don't know what kind of fly it was, but more than likely it was a native fly. Our native plants attract native insects, and so more than likely it was a native one. And so, yes, flies are what pollinated. And the smell of the flower is kind of that pungent smell. It's not a sweet, fragrant flower. So anyway, it attracts the flies. So I think that's what I've seen mostly as the pollinator for it. So in the spring, what are they trying to get rid of? Flies, any of those insects. So if you want your fruit, you got to have your pollinators.
Yeah, thank you. Those are beautiful maroon flowers.
They are. It won't be long. The buds are starting to swell. So it won't be long. They bloom early before the leaves come out.
Okay, great. Next question from Mark. What are the rules for ethically gathering so you don't overharvest populations? And how do you ensure you aren't getting plants that may have been treated with pesticides?
Well, if you grow them yourself, you grow your own, you know your own. Most of mine come from my yard. Every now and then they don't. But if you're harvesting in the wild, there are some rules of foraging. And one of them is if there's If there's a lot of it, you take what you need. If there's only a few specimens of here and a few there, you may look around and see, do you really need this? And if you're gathering fruits, then you always scatter fruits for the birds. You leave some to reseed, and then you leave some, like I always say, for the next group of foragers. So with the berries, they're a renewable resource. So you just don't gather all of them. And generally what you find is they're so small, I go from one patch to another. I can't stay too long in any one patch. So I leave a lot behind when I'm gathering blueberries or cherries, just simply because of the time and energy used to pick them. But then if it's roots are a little trickier because you're digging up the plant. But some roots you can dig up and cut off the bottom part of the root and then replant it. And that would be things, and we don't have ramps in this area, but in the mountains where they do have ramps and people like to go out and forage, that's one way you can do it and not harm the population. So if you can take the tops and replant them, that's great. If it's something like tubers, you just make sure you put tubers back in the ground. So let's see. What were some of the other questions? The main things, just make sure you leave them for the birds and some to reseed and some for others. But if you really want to know what's been, and with herbicides, if herbicides have been used, you're going to see evidence of them around where you're growing. And if there's no obvious, if you're in a place where there should be some dandelions, there should be some of these, weeds that we see on a regular basis. If they're not there, then they've probably had some herbicide sprayed. So move on. But the best thing, if you're going to forage, grow your own. And I have wild areas all around me, and pretty much I'm able to get, I would say 95% of what I have, I grow and gather myself. So that's the best way to do it. Know your own, grow your own. Even if it's wild, you can grow wild things in your yard. They don't have to be cultivated. So be a successful gardener, you grow the wild plants.
That's interesting.
Question, or was there anything I left out on that? There is concern for it, and if leaves on a tree are all droopy, they look like they've been sprayed, then they probably have been. So you just be aware. Awareness is a big thing. Look around you. What's the area like where you're harvesting? How's this land being used? Was this used for agriculture with all the pesticides and herbicides like a year or two ago, or has it gone through the transition to become more organic? So just be aware of the surroundings, the circumstances. How abundant is it or not abundant is it? And are you on private property? Are you on public lands, or is it your own land? And if you can grow it yourself, you're better off. So anyway, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And then Christine is wondering, do you make your own wild cherry brandy?
No, I don't have a still. I would like to make my own brandy. I don't have the means to do that. I do buy it. I would love to.
That does sound good.
Yes.
So you need a still to do that.
I need a still. I guess,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe you can make it without one. I've never made brandy. I have made wine. I guess wine is, you could leave it too long, it becomes vinegar, but I don't know how that fits in with brandy. I've never explored that route.
Yeah, okay, maybe in the next.
The wine was good, but I don't know how it would work as a preservative. I don't know what the alcohol content was. Probably not high.
Sounds good. So Sam is asking, any edible or medicinal plant species we should look out for in Northern Virginia specifically? So maybe your top rated for Northern Virginia.
Repeat that question again. Sorry.
Are there any edible medicinal plant species we should look out for in Northern Virginia specifically?
Oh, there's so many. Yeah, I mean, I didn't include. So black haw was one I thought about. That's one that's in your area. Black haw has edible fruits, medicinal bark. Northern Virginia. Well, you have a lot of pawpaws up there. What were some others? You pretty much have everything up there that's down here, with a few exceptions. You have more pawpaws than we do. Well, only because we have a lot of spraying done down here. So I'm not sure if that. What answer do you want me to give?
I think that works. I could send a link for the Plant Virginia Natives, the Northern Virginia region guide.
And, the other thing is that digital atlas of Virginia flora, that is invaluable for knowing what grows in your area. And if there's a plant that you're interested in or that you're curious about, you can go to the digital atlas and it will tell you if it's in your area or not. But as far as edible medicinal plants, I've done programs up there numerous times, and there's a ton of them. I mean, you would be all day going over which ones are edible medicinal. There are people up there who are doing classes on the edible medicinal plants, and so I know Teresa Boardwine does, and she's in it's at Little Washington area, somewhere up there, and so she does a lot up there with the edible medicinal plants. And so yeah, they get a lot of the same things we get down here.
Yeah, okay. Sam said that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
So a couple more questions. Kitty said, you mentioned that pine sap soap helps to repel chiggers. Do you
Oh, yeah.
have any other suggestions for repelling chiggers when out? Their bites are the bane of my gardening. Yeah, that sounds terrible.
I use pine tar soap, and I do make an herbal insect repellent, but I very rarely use it because I don't need to. Pine tar soap, and you can buy it commercially. I don't make my soap. I'm not a soap maker, but there are those who do, and I guess they get pine tar somewhere commercially. But I keep pine tar. That's the only soap I use in the summer, and I find that's all I need to do. And I don't do anything else to protect myself from biting insects. I just use the pine tar soap, both before I go out and when I come in, and it does the trick. It almost completely removes any. I don't get chiggers hardly at all. Very rarely, I get a few mosquito bites, and occasionally I get some ticks, but not often.
So Kitty asked, so you wash your clothes with any special detergent or pine tar soap?
No, but I use only natural, what is it, seventh generation laundry soap. I don't use the scented kind, and I don't use any scented soap that will attract your insects. So no, I use just unscented seventh generation laundry soap.
Okay, great. And I missed one from earlier. Nisa was wondering, is the linden tree one of the popular trees that the bees use for honey that I've seen as lin honey, Linn honey?
That would be it. I don't have the linden tree in my yard. It grows in another, but yes, it hums with insect activity. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then Philip is wondering, are there edible perennial vegetables?
Edible perennial vegetables. Yes, first one comes to my mind is poke. Poke is not woody, and so of course when included in today's presentation, but poke is a perennial. Poke is edible, but it's also medicinal and it's also poisonous. So you have to get to know all parts of the plant if you're going to eat it. But poke is one that comes to my mind. Perennial vegetables, if I think long enough, I'll come up with a bunch of them. But let me think. There are annuals. I'm thinking of the wild beans. That's an annual though. And they reseed and come back every year. So other vegetables, let me think a bit. Thistles, no, they're biennials.
We have some responses in the chat room: asparagus, kale, rhubarb, fennel over winter.
Not native.
But they're not native.
And rhubarb is not native. And okay, I'm looking at these. Fennel is not native. I'm sorry. I'm almost a winter snow. Oh, somebody came back and said these aren't natives. So yeah, I tend to stick with the natives when I can, unless it's something that I feel like I absolutely need to have. And no, lamb's quarters is not native. Ramps is native, but ramps is one you have to be careful with because it's the root you're digging in. There's been some concern about it being over harvested. So if you have ramps and you're going to harvest them, just make the practice of cutting off the end and replanting it. It can be done, and that's what the Indians would do. So, yeah, that would be one. So, a lot of what we have in our yard and our gardens are not native. These are plants that were introduced, brought over by the settlers, and in the process, they escaped cultivation, and now they grow wild. But so purslane is not native. And there is a wild garlic that is native, but it's not a perennial. It is an annual. It comes back, it dies back and comes back from different roots, unless
Shrub that you want to be a fruit tree as
Is
you.
somebody else talking?
Yeah, I don't think they were I don't think they realized they weren't muted, so I muted them.
Oh,
I
okay. I wasn't
apologize.
hearing the question, and that was why. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's wild garlic, there's wild onions, and so there is a wild onion that's not native. The garlic is field garlic, and it is native, but so there's a mixture, and you'll find them both growing in various places. And then you go someplace and you have wild garlic, field garlic, and so some are native and some aren't. But if it smells like garlic or onions, it's edible. And so, but yeah, so some are, some aren't. So other hackberry, known for any medicinal purposes. Hackberry, I call that one a tease. It's got the skin around the berry tastes like a date. It's sweet, but it's a tease. That's all it is. A thin layer of skin. However, I have heard of people taking that and tincturing it. And I don't know what the medicinal value would be because I haven't explored into it because I haven't used it. So sorry, but I do know it's edible. And if it's edible, it's got medicine in there, probably vitamin E and other things, but I don't know what specifically it would be used to treat. So again, this food medicine, just use it, eat it if you have enough to nibble on.
Oh, sorry. We did have a question about lamb's quarter. Is that native?
No, lamb's quarters is not native.
Uh,
Amaranth.
Maybe not morning light miscampus. Okay, morning light miscampus is a.
I'm sorry.
I think that was another accidental unmute.
I thought maybe so, but okay.
Yeah, it happens.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's great timing. We have another minute or so. But yeah,
One
that
more
was
question for who wants it. Otherwise, you can find more information. If you have questions, you can email me at wildfood@cox.net, or you can check out my website. I have a listing of the native plants that I do have in my nursery that are available, and you can. The listing is on my website at wildwoodsfarm.us. And so, otherwise, if you think of something, you have a question, you can contact me, and I'll just be patient in me getting back to you. My email doesn't always happen, but I will try. So at any rate, yes, thank you, everyone. And I look forward to hearing from you, and enjoy the wild plants. They are, oh, what's the name of the woman in Little Washington? Teresa Boardwine. Green Comfort is her business, and she's awesome. I've learned a lot from her.
great. Thank you. And so I have Vickie's email and your farm website in the chat box if anybody wants to check those out and follow up with Vickie. That was really, really excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you all for the great questions. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your symposium. And we do have our 30-minute break. So make sure you get back here by 1 for the last breakout session.
Okay, it's a beautiful day outside, so I feel the plants calling me. Y'all have a great afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
You want to plant in drifts. Think of color blocks.